In this session, we are going to talk about the early start, early finish, late start and late finish, along with that float calculations. Basically, we are going to discuss about the forward pass and the backward pass in a given network diagram. So this is a typical network diagram that I have depicted over here, where you have the name of the activity in the middle and duration is represented on the middle top portion of the box or the node. Early start and early finish are going to be represented above. Late start and late finish are going to be represented below, along with float in the middle. I've given the legend in the slide itself. So we'll start with the forward pass and the backward pass calculation. Now there are two ways to work this out when you're talking about the PDM diagram, the precedence diagramming method, diagramming technique. There are two methods that we can possibly use in order to identify the early start, early finish and late start and late finish. I'm going to use both the methods so that it is much easier for you guys to answer your exam question in whichever method they are asking. So the first type that we are going to discuss here is the forward pass starting with 0. So basically the early start starts with 0. And then subsequently the early start values are going to be taken from the early finish directly. And early finish of an activity is going to be early start plus duration. Now as we said earlier, it always starts with 0. So activity A starts with 0 and it takes 5 days. So 0 plus 5 is going to be 5 days. So the early finish is also going to be 5. Since A is finishing on the 5th, C and D can start on the 5th day. C, the duration is 4 days, so 5 plus 4 is going to be 9. I is going to be 5 days, so it starts on 9th, so 9 plus 5 is going to be 14. Now let's move on to D. It takes 8 days, so starting on the 5th, so 5 plus 8 is 13. You can't work out G because there is a dependency between D and E, so we need to finish E in order to work out the activity G. So for that, we are going to start with activity B. As we said, the first node should always be 0. So we are putting the early start as 0. Early start plus the 3, the duration is going to be the early finish. And so on and so forth for E and F. We are going to just move on. E is starting on the 3rd and it takes 5 days. So it's finishing on the 8th. Now comparing 13 and 8. D is finishing on the 13th and E is finishing on the 8th. Which means that activity G can start only after the 13th because that's the maximum value you are taking. And G is taking 6 days to complete. So the early finish is going to be 19 days. Of course, you can't work out J. The reason is there is a dependency between G and H. So we are going to move on with F. The early finish for F is 10 days because 3 plus 7. And H is going to be the same value, 10 days. 10 plus 9 is going to be 19. So G is also 19, H is also 19, so we don't have much of a confusion. J is going to be 19. 19 plus 4 is going to be 23. Whenever two nodes are converging, when you are completing the project, in those cases, what I would suggest is take the 23 and write it as under the milestone, which is end, because you will not have confusion while walking backwards. Yeah. Now once we have identified all the early start and early finish starting with 0, the next thing that we are going to do is identify the backward pass. We are going to work out the backward pass with and identify your late start and the late finish values. Again starting with 0. So late finish of the last activity is going to be project duration. In this case, the project duration is 23. And I and J completes the project. So we are taking 23 for both. Please remember, while walking backwards, don't confuse yourself with early start and early finish. Work it out as if your early start and early finish doesn't exist. So you're taking 23 and then you're just moving on 23. I'm working out for J. 23 minus 4 is 19. So G and H will have a late finish of 19. Now for H, 19 minus 9 is going to be 10. So when your late start is 10, for F, which is the previous activity, late finish is also going to be 10. 10 minus 7 is 3. You can't work out the late start and late finish for B because there is a dependency between E and F for it. So we need to finish E, the calculation of E. For that we are moving on with the G activity. G is having a late finish of 19. 19 minus 6 is 13. So D and E is going to have a 13 as a late finish. E has the late finish is 13. 13 minus 5 is 8. Now you have E is starting on the 8th and F is starting on the 3rd. So B has to take the minimum value. So you are taking the minimum value of the late start of the successor activities. So 3 minus 3 is 0. Now let's move on to activity D, where 13 minus 8 is 5. Again, we can't work out A until we finish C. So we are going all the way to I. Now I late finish is 23. 23 minus 5 is going to be 18. Now the same value you are going to put it for the late finish of C, which is 18. 18 minus 4 is going to be 14. Now there is a comparison between 14 and 5, and as we already said, you have to take the minimum value. You take 5 and then you are putting it for A. 5 minus 5 is going to be 0. In this particular case, you have two critical paths. This kind of a project is known as a high-risk project. Yeah. Now, in order to identify the float, there are basically there are three floats, but we are going to calculate two floats over here, which is a total float and a free float. The total float formula is going to be late start minus early start, or late finish minus early finish. Both should be giving you the same value. If it is not, your calculation is wrong somewhere. So you have to basically make sure that the late finish minus early finish or late start minus early start is actually the same value. Now with that, we are working it out. So since we said there are two critical parts, you have two parts with the float of 0. C is having a float of 9 days and I has a float of 9 days. E has a float of 5 days. Yeah, this is the entire calculation when you are starting an activity with 0. Now I'm moving on to the next type of a calculation where the early start is starting from, where the early start starts with 1, value 1. So we are going to start with, we are going to go with that approach now. Forward pass starting with 1. So the early start of the first activity is going to be 1. So here you are taking it as 1. A is starting on the first. So 1 plus 5. Here you can take, you're including 1. Yeah, so you need to take 5 days. So you need to take 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So basically you're finishing on the 5th. Remember, you're not going to just take 1 plus 5. Yeah, it's not 1 plus 5. It is 1 plus 5 minus 1. That's why if you look at the formula I have given earlier, early finish is equal to early start plus duration minus 1. Since A is finishing on the 5th, you need to, basically you can take it this way. You're finishing an activity by today evening, 5th evening. So by right you can start C on the next day, which means C and D can start on the 6th. So it should always be plus 1. C is 6, 6 plus 4. As I said, it's inclusive. So 6, 7, 8 and 9. So it's going to be 4 days and it's finishing on the 9th. I is going to be 10th. 10 plus 5. So 10, 11, 12, 13 and 14. So you're finishing on the 14th. Yeah, so we are going to work out with the same logic. D is going to have, D has an early start of 6 and has a duration of 8. So you're going to finish this on the 13th because 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13. That makes it 8. So remember, you're including the early start value here. Of course, you can't work out G because there is a dependency between E and D in order to start G. So we are starting with B, activity B. Early start for activity B is 1. 1 plus 3 minus 1 is going to be 3. E and F can start on the 4th. So E is starting on the 4th and it takes 5 days. So basically you're finishing on the 8th. So 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. Now D is 13, E is 8. So you're taking the highest value, which is 13. 13 plus 1 will become 14. So G is starting on the 14th. 14 plus 6 is minus 1 is going to be 19. Now we are moving on to activity F. F starts on the 4th and it takes 7 days duration. So it is going to be 10. The early finish is 10. H starts on the 11th and it takes 9 days. So you're finishing it on the 19th. Now 19 and 19, so it's going to be the same value. You're taking 19 plus 1, which is 20. 20 plus 4 is 23. Of course, it's going to be the same value. So you're taking and writing it separately as 23. Now we are going to work out the backward pass. Backward pass logic is also the same as what we did earlier, but you're going to just take the late finish as the same as project duration. So I and J is going to take it as 23. The late finish is 23. Now, sorry, J is finishing on the 23rd. So 23 minus 4. So it is going to be 23, 22, 21 and 20. So it's 4 days. You're subtracting 4 plus 1. So it is going to be 20. So G and H starts on the, late finish is on the 19th. Now 19, so once you have 19, H is going to take 19 minus 9 plus 1, which is 11. F is going to be 10. 10 minus 7 plus 1 is going to be 4. Now we are moving on to G. 19 minus 6 plus 1 is going to be 14. So D and E is going to have a late finish of 13. Now E is going to be 13 minus 6 plus 1, which is going to be 9 days. So when you are starting, the late start of E is 9 and late start of F is 4. So for B, you're going to take 4, which is the minimum value, minus 1. So you're taking it as 3. 3 minus 3 is going to be 1. Now let's move on to activity D, which is 13 minus 8 is 6. Of course, you can't work out A until we finish C. So we are moving all the way to activity I. Activity I, the late finish is 23. So 23 minus 5 is 19. Now you are taking the same 19 value and you're just subtracting 1 to that. So it becomes 18. 18 minus 4 plus 1 is going to be 15. Now there's a comparison between 15 and 6. So what we are trying to do is take 6 minus 1, which is going to be 5. 5 minus 5 is going to be 1. So this is how typically we work out the backward pass starting with 1. Float is also the same formula. There is no change in identifying your float. It is going to be the same for whether you're starting with 0 or you're starting with 1.